Out here on the open road, it's supposed to be just you, the engine, and the miles ahead. But when the sun sets and the highways grow empty, that's when the strange things happen. From ghostly encounters in the fog, to unsettling roadside setups, and even chilling moments of missing time. These aren't just campfire stories. They're the first-hand experiences of real truckers, men and women who've seen things they'll never forget. So buckle up, turn off the lights, and settle in for 10 of the most terrifying true stories ever told from America's loneliest roads. My name's Brandon. I've been a long-haul trucker for over 20 years, and I'll tell you right now, I don't scare easy. I've slept in my rig during whiteouts, hauled freight through backwoods in the dead of night, and even delivered into sketchy industrial zones at 3 a.m. But what happened to me one night in Pennsylvania, it still gives me chills. This was back around 2002, I think. I was hauling a load from Ohio back to New Jersey, cruising along I-80 eastbound through the middle of Pennsylvania. I'd driven that route more times than I could count. Trees lining both sides of the highway, barely any lights, just the occasional green mile marker glowing in the dark. It was winter, freezing cold. The temp outside was maybe 25 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a thin layer of snow on the ground, not enough to ice the roads, but just enough to remind you it was damn cold. After 10 or 11 hours behind the wheel, I felt the fatigue settling in, so I pulled off to the shoulder, just a wide turnout between two hills. Nothing official, but a common spot where guys park for a quick nap. There were 2 other big rigs already there. Both were shut off, hazard lights blinking in sync like quiet little beacons in the dark. I parked right behind them, cut the engine, locked both doors, and pulled my curtains shut. Climbing into the sleeper, I remember texting my wife a quick, "Made it safe, gonna nap," on my old Nokia before flipping it shut. The truck was silent. No radio, no passing cars, just the wind occasionally brushing against the cab. Now, truckers get used to all kinds of weird noises at night. Cooling engines tick, trailers creak, wind whistles. But the noise that woke me up, it didn't belong. It was a loud thud, clear, deliberate, on the passenger side door. I jolted awake, heart already pounding. Instinctively, I reached under my pillow for the wooden bat I kept for emergencies. The dim light from my bunk flickered on as I yanked the curtain to the right side. No one there. Just the faint reflection of the trailer ahead of me glinting off the snow. I squinted through the glass, trying to see through the fogged-up window. Nothing. I waited, listened. Maybe it was ice sliding off, a tree branch, then bang, driver's side. I nearly dropped the bat. I spun around, pulled back the curtain on my left. Still nothing. Darkness, just the driver's side mirror and some swirling fog. No movement, no shadows, just quiet. I stayed still for a moment. My breathing was shallow, ears tuned in to every little creak and pop. Both doors were locked. I checked them again, just to be sure. I was starting to convince myself I imagined it. Maybe I was dreaming, when both doors slammed at once. Bang, bang, hard. So hard the whole truck shook. My chest tightened. It felt like 2 people, one on each side, were pounding their fists into the doors with everything they had. My rig wasn't new, but it was solid, and it was rattling. I ripped open both curtains all the way, bat in hand, eyes darting between the left and right windows. Nothing, nobody, just darkness, and the soft hiss of wind curling past the seams of the cab. I sat there frozen, bat in hand, just staring into the dark. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it echo inside the cab. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't a dream. The shaking, the sound. Hell, I wasn't imagining that. I leaned over, cracked the window an inch to listen. Nothing but wind. No footsteps crunching in the snow. No running. No whispers. No vehicles. Just dead silence. I turned my headlamp on and scanned outside through both side mirrors. Still no movement. The other 2 rigs ahead of me, still dark, no lights on, no engines running. I was just about to convince myself it was some kind of bizarre prank, or maybe a wild animal banging around when, click. The first rig ahead of me lit up. Headlights flared on, brake lights glowed red. Then the engine roared to life. Not even 10 seconds later, the second truck did the exact same thing. And that freaked me out more than the banging, because now I knew I wasn't the only one who heard it. We hadn't spoken, hadn't signaled, hadn't done anything, but all three of us, one after another, were now firing up our rigs like we had just been given a silent warning. I threw my bat into the passenger seat, turned the key, and my engine growled to life. I flicked on the high beams and scanned the shoulder in front of me. Nothing but tire tracks and snow. I hesitated for a second, waiting to see if someone might appear. A hitchhiker, a prankster, hell, even a cop playing a joke. I would have welcomed a damn explanation. But there was nothing, no movement, no signs anyone had been near the truck. The two rigs ahead pulled away from the shoulder, one after the other, merging back onto I-80 without hesitation. I followed. I didn't even check my mirrors. I just hit the gas and got back on the road. For miles, we drove in a quiet, eerie caravan. No CB chatter, no lights flashing, just three rigs hauling ass through the frozen Pennsylvania highway like we were all running from something we didn't want to name. I stayed about 200 feet behind the last rig, watching their taillights cut through the dark like twin red eyes. I figured maybe we'd all stop at the next rest area and talk it out, compare notes, try to make sense of what just happened. But the first rig peeled off an exit. The second followed, taking a different off-ramp not 5 miles later. And just like that, I was alone again. About 20 minutes down the road, I spotted a brightly lit rest area and pulled in. The parking lot had a few trucks, a couple of RVs, and some passenger cars. I parked near the far end, left the engine running, and just sat there for a minute, trying to slow my breathing, trying to act like everything was normal. But nothing about that night felt normal. I got out, stretched my legs, and headed inside for some hot coffee. My hands were still shaking when I handed the cashier a $5. She looked at me like she was about to ask if I was okay, but didn't say anything. Maybe she saw that look before. There were two other drivers sitting at one of the booths, older guys, both wearing Carhartt jackets and tired eyes. I thought about walking over, asking them if they'd ever had something weird happen on the road, but I didn't. Because how do you even start a conversation like that? Hey, has your rig ever been pounded on by invisible fists in the middle of the night? Yeah, that'd go over real well. Instead, I just sat at a nearby table, sipping my coffee and staring out the window at my truck. I kept looking at the doors like I expected them to suddenly shake again. They didn't. I stayed there about half an hour, long enough to warm up and calm down. Then I hit the road again, made it to New Jersey by sunrise without any more strange events. But something about that night never sat right with me. I never figured out what it was. I never talked to the other drivers. I don't know if it was a prank, something paranormal, or some twisted trick of sound and sleep deprivation. But I felt it. The banging, the truck shaking, the silence, the unspoken panic as all three of us started our engines and got the hell out of there. Over the years, I've told the story to a few other truckers, usually late at night when everyone's sharing road stories over coffee or smokes. And more than once, I've seen a look in someone's eye, like they've been through something similar. They don't always say it, but they nod, and that's enough. Because out here, on the highways and back roads, there are things that happen that you just don't explain. You just keep driving. My name's Rick. Been a long-haul trucker going on 18 years now, and I've seen my fair share of strange things out there on the road. You drive enough miles, sleep in enough rest stops, and eventually the weirdness finds you. But one night, this wasn't just weird, it stuck with me. Still does. This was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, early fall. I was hauling a shipment of electronics from Seattle down to Dallas. Took a more scenic route than usual, one that cut me through a stretch of remote highway in the Colorado Rockies. Beautiful during the day, but at night, you're driving through a wall of pitch-black wilderness. I'd just passed through this tiny town, can't even remember the name now, one of those places with a single diner and a gas station that closes before 9 p.m. It was around 1:30 in the morning, and I'd been driving straight for a few hours. I was getting drowsy, my legs were stiff, and to be blunt, I needed to take a leak and have a smoke. I saw a sign for a rest area coming up, but by the time I noticed it, I'd already passed the exit ramp. There weren't going to be any others for a long while. Highway was dead quiet, no cars in sight, no lights ahead or behind. I figured, screw it. I'd just pull over onto the shoulder for a quick break. It's not like anyone was gonna bother me out here. So I eased my rig onto a gravel pull-off just before a bend in the road, turned on my hazard lights, and climbed down into the cool night air. The place was dead silent. No wind, no traffic, just darkness and the faint smell of pine in the air. I walked around to the side of the trailer, did my business, then leaned back against the cab to enjoy a cigarette. Took a few drags, let the smoke curl into the air, and stared out into the black forest. I could barely see 10 feet past the guardrail. It was that kind of night, moonless, overcast, and quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. That's when I saw him. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. You stare into the dark long enough, your brain starts filling in shapes. But this wasn't my imagination. There, just beyond the tree line, maybe 30 or 40 feet away, a figure stepped out. It was a man. Not a deer, not a shadow. A man. At first, I didn't move. I just stared, cigarette halfway to my mouth, trying to process what I was seeing. The guy was walking out of the woods like he'd been watching me the whole time. He didn't stumble, didn't look confused, just walked straight, calm and steady, right toward the truck. Let me be clear, we were miles from the nearest town, and even that town barely had a functioning gas pump. There was no reason, no logical reason, for anyone to be out here on foot, in the middle of the night, stepping out of a dense forest. I didn't shout, didn't panic. I just flicked my cigarette to the gravel, walked calmly back to the cab, and climbed inside. Locked the doors. My keys were already in the ignition, so I put the truck in drive, kept my foot on the brake, and watched him through the windshield. He kept coming. The man looked like he was in his mid-40s, scruffy beard, hoodie, jeans. He didn't look threatening, but something about the way he moved, deliberate and silent, made the hairs on my neck stand up. He walked up along the passenger side of the truck, and for a second, I lost sight of him. Then, tap tap, he knocked on the passenger window. Not aggressive, not loud, just a slow, steady knock. I debated rolling down the window. Every instinct I had said don't do it. But something about him, I don't know. He didn't look dangerous. He looked broken. So I cracked the window just a couple inches. "You all right, man?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He didn't answer right away, just stood there, breathing heavy, eyes a little wide. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "I need you to call the cops." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't expecting that. Not, "Can you help me?" or "Can I get a ride?" Just straight up, "Call the cops." I stared at him for a second, mind racing. Finally, I asked, "Why? What's going on?" He swallowed, took a step back from the window. Then he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I came out here to kill myself." My breath caught in my throat. He went on, slowly, haltingly. "I walked out into the woods with a kitchen knife. I was gonna do it. I had everything planned. But when I pulled the knife out, I thought about my daughters. I couldn't do it." He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled something out. My heart skipped. I almost threw the truck into gear and peeled off right then. But he just knelt down and placed it gently on the gravel beside him. A kitchen knife, still folded in a towel. I stayed quiet. My hands were shaking. He looked up at me. "Please, just call someone." I nodded slowly and grabbed my phone. Signal was weak out here, flickering between one bar and none, but I managed to get a call through to 911. I gave them my location as best I could, using mile markers and nearby exit signs, and told them there was a man in distress on the side of the highway. The dispatcher asked if he was armed. I looked at the knife sitting a few feet away from him, still wrapped in that towel. "He was," I said carefully. But he set it down, voluntarily. He's calm, says he doesn't want to hurt anyone, including himself anymore. The dispatcher told me to stay in the vehicle and not approach. I agreed. so I stayed there, engine idling, window still cracked just a bit. The man sat down on the gravel shoulder, arms wrapped around his knees. Every now and then he'd sniff or wipe his face. He wasn't sobbing, not loudly anyway. It was more like he was unraveling slowly, piece by piece, under the weight of everything he'd almost done. After a few minutes, I spoke through the window. Just small talk. Told him I was a trucker, headed to Dallas. He nodded, said he used to live in Texas, said he hadn't seen his kids in over a year. He kept apologizing. I told him not to. I told him he did the right thing by stepping out of those woods instead of staying in them. He didn't respond, but he looked at me for a long moment, and I swear, I could feel the fear leave him just a little. The cops arrived maybe 20 minutes later. 2 cruisers, lights off, quiet approach. One of them talked to the man gently while the other asked me a few questions. They patted him down, took the knife, and helped him into the back seat without cuffs. He went willingly. Before they drove off, I walked up and asked if I could say something to him. The officer gave me a nod. I leaned in through the open door. He looked up, eyes red and exhausted. I just said, "Hey, whatever you're going through, don't give up on those girls. You walked out of the woods tonight. That matters." He nodded, lips pressed tight, and said softly, "Thank you." And then they were gone. I stood on that shoulder a while longer, finishing another cigarette with shaking hands before climbing back into my cab. I sat there a long time, engine humming beneath me, staring out into the trees where he'd come from. You get used to loneliness out here. Long miles, empty roads, no voices except talk radio and the rumble of tires. But that night reminded me how loud silence can get when someone's hurting. Sometimes the scariest stories don't come from ghosts or shadows in the dark. Sometimes it's the pain someone carries quietly, and the choice they almost made. I never saw that man again. I don't know what happened to him after that night, but I think about him every time I pass a forested stretch of highway. I wonder if he found peace. I hope he made it back to his daughters, and I hope somehow he knows that a stranger in a truck, just doing his job, never forgot him. Name's Tony. Been a trucker for a little over a decade now. Reefer, flatbed, dry van, you name it. Most of the time I just put my head down and do the miles. Not much rattles me anymore. But there was one night, just one, that still sits in the back of my brain like a bad taste. Back then I was running a shift called Meet and Turn out of Indianapolis. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically where one driver takes a load halfway to its destination, then meets another driver coming from the opposite end. We switch trailers, maybe shake hands, and head back to our home terminals. Simple, efficient, and honestly, boring as hell most nights. This particular meet point was in a small transfer lot outside of Dayton, Ohio. Nothing but cracked pavement, a couple of busted out floodlights, and a porta-john that I wouldn't step foot in unless my kidneys were about to explode. It wasn't an official truck stop, just a forgotten lot near an old industrial park that dispatch liked to use because it was neutral ground. I had been running that same meet for a couple of months, and by then I knew the other driver, Dan, was always late. Not drastically, just by 30 to 45 minutes. So when I pulled in that night around 2:50 a.m., I knew I had time to kill. The lot was dark. One of the lights near the entrance flickered every now and then, but most of the place was swallowed in shadows. No other trucks, no security patrols, just me, my rig, and the hum of my engine cooling off. I backed into my usual corner, checked my mirrors, and killed the engine. Set the brakes, leaned my seat back, and closed my eyes for what I figured would be a 20-minute power nap before Dan showed up. Not even 10 minutes in, I heard barking. At first it was faint, just a sharp yap in the distance. I ignored it. Could have been anything. Some stray dog sniffing around the garbage bins behind the abandoned warehouse nearby. But it didn't stop. The barking kept going, louder, closer. Not frantic, not panicked, just this steady, angry bark, like a dog that didn't want you near its yard. My first thought was, damn, someone really left their mutt out here at 3 a.m.? I sat up, still half asleep, rubbed my eyes, and leaned forward to look out the driver's side window. and what I saw made my blood run cold. Standing just inches from my driver's side window was a man, not a dog, not a prank. A full-grown man, probably in his mid-30s, barking at me like a damn Doberman. He was tall, heavy-set, maybe 6'2", wearing a dirty flannel shirt and jeans. His eyes were wide, wild, and locked onto mine like he'd been waiting for me to wake up. His face was twisted, not angry exactly, just feral. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there was foam building at the corners of his mouth. And the barking? It wasn't a joke. He was going all in. Deep, guttural, aggressive barks, like he was trying to scare off a trespasser. Each bark came with a twitch of his shoulders, like an animal lunging at a fence. I froze. Not out of fear exactly, more like disbelief. My brain was still trying to piece together what the hell I was seeing. A guy barking? At a truck? At me? I didn't want to spook him. The last thing I needed was for this dude to start punching the glass or trying to climb onto the steps. So slowly, keeping my eyes on him, I reached down to the ignition and turned the key. My rig came to life with a low rumble. The guy didn't flinch, just kept barking. I eased the truck into gear, gently let off the brakes. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted to roll away, put some distance between me and whatever was going on in this guy's head. But as soon as the truck started moving, he started chasing me. I'm serious. He dropped to all fours like a damn animal and bolted alongside the cab, barking and snarling and slapping the side of the trailer like a rabid dog protecting its turf. At this point, I stopped caring about subtlety. I hit the gas. The lot wasn't huge, but there was just enough room to loop around the far side and swing toward the exit. I made the turn fast, watching him in my mirrors. He didn't keep up long. After about 20 or 30 feet, he slowed to a crawl, then stood up straight, just standing there in the red glow of my taillights, staring after me, still barking. I didn't stop until I hit the main road again. My heart was hammering, and my hands were gripping the wheels so tight they ached. Once I merged back onto the highway, I finally exhaled, like really exhaled, for the first time since I woke up. I must have driven 5 or 6 miles before I found a 24-hour gas station with enough lighting to make me feel like I wasn't alone in the universe anymore. I parked, walked inside, and bought a terrible cup of coffee I didn't even want. Just needed something warm to hold in my shaking hands. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not the clerk, not dispatch, not even Dan when I met up with him an hour later. What the hell was I supposed to say? Hey, sorry I'm early. Some dude was barking at me like a pit bull and chased my truck across a gravel lot. Even now, I don't really know how to explain it. Drugs? Mental breakdown? Maybe a full-on psychotic episode? I've heard stories. Every trucker has. But it's different when it's your window someone's foaming at. What stuck with me wasn't just the barking. It was the eyes. The kind of eyes that don't see you as a person, but as a thing, a threat, a target, or maybe something to play with. And here's the worst part. That lot? I'd been napping there once or twice a week for months. It felt safe, familiar. But after that night, I don't do that anymore. If I'm running meet and turns now, I stay awake until the other driver shows. Doesn't matter if I'm dead tired. I sit up, lights on, doors locked, engine idling if I have to. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather be tired than caught off guard again. Because out here on the road, it's not just potholes or deer you have to watch for. Sometimes it's something, or someone, you couldn't imagine even if you tried. And let me tell you, the next time I hear barking in the middle of the night, I'm putting that truck in drive and not looking back. Name's Kyle. Been doing long-haul midnight runs for a few years now. Mostly solo, mostly quiet. You do this job long enough, and the weirdness kind of blends into the rhythm. Foggy roads, late-night CB chatter, the occasional crackhead at a fuel island. But one night outside Amarillo, Texas, something happened that I still can't wrap my head around. It was about 11:45 p.m., and I'd been driving for close to 10 hours. I was hauling dry goods from Oklahoma City down to Albuquerque. I remember checking the GPS and seeing a Love's truck stop coming up in about 20 miles. and figured I could push on to that point. But man, fatigue hit me like a sledgehammer out of nowhere. My eyes got heavy, hands were cramping, and I felt that twitch in my neck that says, pull over now, or end up in a ditch. I passed a small exit sign for an old frontage road. No name, no lights, just a cracked up shoulder and what looked like an empty gravel lot off to the right. No other trucks, no cars, not a single street lamp working. It looked dead, but I was too damn tired to care. I pulled in, eased the rig into the corner of the lot, and shut everything down. Locked both doors from the inside, slid the curtains shut, and climbed into the sleeper. It was quiet, almost too quiet. No wind, no bugs, no distant hum of the highway, just silence. Didn't even take my boots off. I remember lying down thinking, I'll just crash here for 5 or 6 hours, then finish the last leg in the morning. And that's the last thing I remember before everything went blank. I woke up to red and blue lights flashing through the cracks in my sleeper curtain. At first, I thought I was dreaming, maybe a weird stress nightmare from too much caffeine and not enough rest. But then came the knock. Tap, tap, tap. Firm and deliberate, driver's side door. I sat up fast, heart hammering. I peeked through the curtain and immediately saw 3 highway patrol cruisers parked behind my rig. One of the troopers was standing right by my mirror, flashlight in hand. I opened the curtain all the way and blinked hard, trying to get my bearings. But something was off, way off. The truck stop lot was gone. There were no buildings, no lights, no gravel pull-off, just open road and an empty shoulder. Nothing but flat Texas fields stretching for miles. I cracked the window. "Everything all right, officer?" The trooper looked at me like I'd just come back from Mars. "Sir, are you aware you're parked on the shoulder of US 60, about 15 miles outside of Amarillo?" I blinked again. 15 miles? No, I parked in a lot near an old truck stop off the frontage road last night. I haven't moved since. He tilted his head slightly, like he was waiting for the punchline. "You've been here since around 3 a.m., he said. "We got a call from a passing motorist about an abandoned rig sitting on the shoulder. When we showed up, you were still in the sleeper. Engine off, keys in the ignition." My mouth went dry. I didn't move the truck. I swear, I went to sleep back in that lot. Both doors were locked. I haven't touched anything." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Well, the weird part is, a farmer across the road called in too. Said he saw someone in a black jumpsuit running from your cab into his field just before we arrived. That stopped me cold." "A what?" I asked. "A man in black. Took off running into the wheat fields, maybe 5 minutes before we showed up. We sent a unit out to check, but didn't find anything." I felt a chill creep down my spine. "So, someone stole the truck? Moved it here?" "That's what we figured," he said slowly. "Until we saw this." He motioned toward the door handle on my side. I looked down, nothing unusual. "Locked," he said. "Same on the passenger side. No signs of forced entry. And no damage to the ignition. No tools, no broken glass, nothing." I checked both doors again myself. Still locked. From the inside. I was sleeping in that cab the entire night. And yet somehow, I wasn't where I left it. After the troopers made sure I was all right and hadn't had a stroke or something, they took a statement and let me go. They were professional, but you could tell, none of them really knew what to make of it. They chalked it up to some thief who managed to hotwire the truck, move it 15 miles down the highway, and vanish into a field before anyone could catch him. But even they admitted, it didn't add up. There were no tracks in the gravel lot I originally parked in, no tire marks leaving the scene. And how the hell do you steal a rig, drive it with a guy still sleeping in the sleeper, and somehow lock the doors from the inside before bailing? That detail never made sense. It still doesn't. After the officers left, I sat there on the shoulder with the engine idling, just frozen, trying to retrace every step from the night before. Had I sleep-driven? No, my logs were clean. My engine history showed the truck started and moved sometime around 2:50 a.m., but I had no memory of anything. I didn't drink. I didn't take anything. I was sober, clear-headed. and scared out of my damn mind. I eventually made it to Albuquerque later that day, but the drive was different. I kept checking the mirrors, kept glancing at the passenger seat. Couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had been in that cab with me. You drive long enough, you hear stories. Guys who fall asleep and wake up parked sideways. Weird hitchhikers who vanish. Lights in the sky out in the desert. And, yeah, most of it's nonsense. But every now and then, one sticks with you. This one stuck. I don't park in unlit lots anymore. I don't cut corners on security, and I damn sure don't sleep as deep as I used to. That night did something to me. Not because of what happened, but because I'll never know how it happened. The doors were locked. I was in the sleeper. And yet, somehow, I ended up 15 miles away with no explanation. Out here on the road, that's the kind of story you don't tell to just anyone. People laugh, shrug it off. But if you've been out here long enough, you know. Sometimes the highway doesn't give you answers. It just leaves you with questions you never wanted to ask in the first place. Name's Jake. Been driving OTR for a little over 15 years now, mostly hauling general freight through the Southwest and Rockies. I've had breakdowns in the Mojave, dodged elk in Idaho, and pulled doubles through blizzards in Wyoming. But one of the weirdest, creepiest things I ever experienced happened a few years back on a detour through the Utah mountains. I was running a load out of Tucson, Arizona, headed for Salt Lake City, Utah. Normally, that route's easy, just ride I-15 up. But at the time, parts of the main highway up north had been wiped out by a flash flood and were still under heavy construction. Dispatch rerouted me through some back mountain roads in southern Utah, winding, dark, and not exactly made for 18-wheelers. I don't mind quiet roads, but this stretch felt wrong. No towns, no gas stations, not even a rest area. Just two-lane blacktop cutting through nowhere. By the time it hit 10:30 p.m., I was beat. I'd been rolling since early morning, and with no safe place to pull off, I decided to just ease onto a wide gravel shoulder near a bend. It wasn't ideal, but I wasn't about to fall asleep behind the wheel on a grade. I shut the rig down, locked both doors, and climbed into the sleeper. Outside, it was pitch black. I mean zero light pollution. The kind of darkness that swallows your rig whole. No distant glow from a city, no headlights, no moon. Just silence and black trees out every window. The GPS said the nearest town was over 40 miles away, and my cell had no bars. Still, I felt safe enough. Killed the lights, cracked the bunk window a sliver for airflow, and tried to get some shut-eye. That was around 11 o'clock. At 4 a.m., I woke up to a sound I've never heard before, and hope I never hear again. Someone, was messing with my air lines and power cables. That's the set of hoses and cords that run between the back of your cab and the front of the trailer, basically right behind the sleeper. The weird part, those cables are literally 6 inches from my head, separated only by a few inches of steel wall. I could hear them moving, tugging, tapping. At first, I thought maybe an animal had gotten up there, maybe a bear or mountain lion. But then I felt it. Something heavy climbed onto the catwalk, the metal landing behind the cab, and the whole truck shook. That landing behind the cab, called the catwalk, it isn't meant for much foot traffic, but it can handle weight. And whatever just climbed onto it had to weigh a good 200 to 300 pounds, maybe more. The metal groaned under the pressure, and I could feel the suspension shift slightly under me. At that point, I was wide awake. Every nerve in my body lit up. My first thought? Mountain lion. Or maybe a bear. Something big enough to climb, but dumb enough to get that close to a human in a locked cab. My hand went straight to the aluminum bat I keep beside the bunk, but then I froze. I listened, and I realized, whatever it wasn't growling. It wasn't scratching or pawing. It was moving deliberately, stepping around back there, like it was checking something, not scavenging, searching. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I reeled back and slammed my open palm into the cab wall, hard. It echoed like a gunshot through the steel. My goal was simple, scare the thing off, whatever it was. Instead, what I heard made my blood run cold. A man's voice, screaming. A full-on panicked, "Holy crap, I wasn't expecting that" kind of scream. And then, a thud, like someone had just fallen backwards off the catwalk onto the ground. That was immediately followed by yelling, lots of it. I heard at least a dozen voices suddenly erupt around the truck, shouting commands, swearing, scattering, feet crunching on gravel, gear rattling, flashlights switching on. I scrambled to the front, pulled the curtain open, and flipped on my exterior lights. What I saw made zero sense. There were soldiers, dozens of them, wearing fatigues, helmets, packs, some holding fake rifles. They were spread out around the truck like I'd just landed in the middle of a military drill. I stepped out onto the steps, halfway between terrified and pissed. What the hell is going on? One guy near the front looked up at me, red-faced and embarrassed. "Sir, sorry, we thought you were the decoy." I blinked. The what? The target vehicle. The abandoned truck for the training op. It's supposed to be 3 miles back down the road. I just stood there on my steps, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. About 15 or 20 soldiers, Army reserves by the looks of it, scattered around my truck, some still catching their breath, others sheepishly backing away like kids who just broke a window. A couple had dropped gear in the scramble, and one poor guy was rubbing his back where he must have landed after falling off my catwalk. The guy who spoke to me first stepped closer and took off his helmet. "Sir, I swear, we had no idea anyone was actually in the truck. We were doing a midnight ruck and capture drill. Our CO told us the target was an abandoned tractor trailer out here along the highway, and we were supposed to secure it quietly as part of the exercise." I stared at him. "You telling me this was training?" "Yes, sir. We're with the Army Reserve out of Cedar City. The actual decoy truck is supposed to be parked back there." He pointed down the road into the darkness behind him. "Looks like we, got the wrong one." "No kidding," I muttered. Now here's the kicker. I'm ex-military myself, served in the Marines before I got into trucking. So once the adrenaline wore off and I realized I wasn't being robbed, attacked, or haunted, I started to see the humor in it. I shook my head and let out a breathy laugh. "You guys scared the living hell out of me." He laughed too, nervously. "Honestly, you scared the hell out of us. I was the one on your catwalk. When you slammed that wall, I thought I'd just triggered some trapdoor or something." Turns out they'd been split into squads, each assigned to quietly capture a target without alerting a nearby enemy force. They'd spent hours hiking with gear through the dark, working off coordinates. Their GPS had apparently pinged my location as the objective. Once they realized their mistake, they radioed it in to their commanding officer. He told them to stand down and not mess with me anymore. One of the squads circled back to the real target truck, an old abandoned rig used for this kind of drill, and the rest stayed put until they got the all clear. We shared a few awkward laughs, and they apologized again, sincerely. One guy even handed me an MRE as a peace offering. Beef stew, not bad if you're starving. I told them I was just glad it wasn't something worse. The idea of someone, or something, messing with my airlines at 4 a.m. out in the middle of nowhere. That's the kind of thing that'll mess with your head. After they moved out, I sat in the cab for a while, lights on, coffee brewing. There was no way I was getting back to sleep. And to this day, every time I hear something tap or creak behind the cab, my first thought isn't animal or wind. It's some poor guy in uniform thinking I'm part of his night op. Out here, the road throws all kinds of strange things your way, but nothing's weirder than being mistaken for a military objective in your own damn sleeper. Name's Travis. I was hauling reefer through Kansas late one summer night a few years back, somewhere along I-70, heading eastbound toward Topeka. That stretch of highway is usually boring as hell, just flat land, endless wind, and fields stretching to nowhere. But that night, it turned into something else entirely. It started with a storm, and not just a regular Midwest thunderstorm. I'm talking biblical level, like the sky's about to snap in half kind of storm. I'd been watching flashes of lightning on the horizon for about an hour when it finally caught up with me. One second I was cruising along at 65, and the next I could barely see the road in front of me. Rain hit the windshield like it had a personal grudge, and the wipers were practically useless. Water started pooling across the blacktop, and with the wind gusting hard enough to rock the cab, I figured I'd better pull off. Luckily, there was a service plaza up ahead, one of those big rest areas with vending machines, truck parking, and maybe 2 working street lamps on a good night. I eased my rig in, parked near the edge of the lot, and cut the engine. The rain drummed on the roof like a freight train. That's when things got weird. I was sitting there in the dark, just watching the rain hammer the windshield and light up every few seconds with each lightning strike. Thunder rolled low and deep, the kind that vibrates in your chest. Visibility was garbage, just sheets of water and the occasional flicker of distant headlights from the highway. Then, suddenly, blackout. It wasn't just the parking lot lights going out. Everything shut off. No glow from the service plaza. No signs from the vending machines. Just pitch black outside except for the occasional lightning flash. I leaned forward in my seat, thinking maybe the power had tripped with the storm, which wouldn't have been unusual. That's when I saw it. There was this massive, blindingly bright light moving behind the clouds. Not lightning. This thing was steady, controlled. It moved too slow to be a plane, but too fast and smooth to be part of the storm. It didn't pulse or flicker. It just glided, hidden behind the thick storm cover. At first, it was off behind the tree line, over some low hills just past the edge of the service plaza. Then it started to drift forward, toward me. And I mean, this thing was huge. I couldn't see the shape directly, but the light it cast? Unreal. Everything around me started to glow a pale bluish white. The asphalt, the side of my truck, even the rain falling in sheets looked like glowing strings in a wind tunnel. It lit the entire lot, but not like a floodlight or a spotlight. More like ambient light from a full moon, if the moon was about 500 feet above your head and humming quietly. The weirdest part? No sound, no engine, no rotor noise, no jet wash, just thunder from the storm, and this silent glowing light creeping across the sky like it was scanning the earth for something. I didn't even breathe for a while. My hands were just frozen on the steering wheel, eyes glued to the top of the windshield. If I'd seen one of those tripod things from War of the Worlds come walking out of the tree line, I wouldn't have even blinked. I was fully ready for aliens at that point. The thing kept moving, took maybe 5 to 10 minutes to drift from the tree line, over the service plaza, and then beyond the back of the building. As soon as it was gone from view, the glow disappeared, darkness returned, and that's when things got even weirder. So I'm just sitting there in the cab, heart pounding, trying to process what the hell I just saw. That glowing light had vanished behind the service plaza, like it slipped through a crack in the storm. The parking lot was dark again, the rain still coming down hard, and everything was dead silent. No hum of vending machines, no distant engines, nothing. Like the whole world had taken a breath and forgot to exhale. Then, just like that, the storm stopped. No drizzle, no slow fade. 1 minute it was coming down in sheets, and the next it was bone dry, like someone had flipped a switch and turned the rain off. I'm not exaggerating, it was instant. And then, the parking lot lights came back on. Buzz, flick, snap. One by one, like dominoes, the lights lining the plaza flickered to life. The dull yellow glow filled the lot again like nothing had ever happened. The vending machine lights came on, the building lights. Even the damn hand dryer inside the men's room kicked on for half a second and startled some poor guy coming out. It was all just back. Normal. But it didn't feel normal. That stretch of time, those 10, maybe 15 minutes, felt like something had come down out of the sky, looked around, and then disappeared like it had seen enough. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see some hovering craft or lights dancing through the clouds. But nope, nothing. I fired up the engine, put the truck in gear, and pulled back onto I-70 like my life depended on it. Didn't even stop for coffee. I was done with that plaza. Even now, years later, I can't explain it. Was it military? Atmospheric? Something else? Hell if I know. All I know is I've driven through hundreds of storms in every corner of this country, but only once did I see the sky light up like that. And whatever it wasn't lightning. Name's Derek. I used to run solo routes through northern Montana, mostly timber and equipment hauls up near the Canadian border. That part of the state is just endless wilderness, dense pine, narrow roads, and more bears than people. Out there, you can drive for hours and not see another soul, especially once you get north of Hogg and start heading into the bush roads. There's this one route I used to take, a long isolated stretch that cut across a few old logging zones. Miles of flat road, trees packed in tight on both sides. No lights, no markers, no cell signal for most of it. You break down out there, you better hope someone's coming the other direction in the next couple hours, or bring a good coat. Anyway, I was about 4 hours into my run that day. Sky was overcast, early fall. I hadn't seen another vehicle in maybe an hour, just the usual squirrel darting across the road or an occasional hawk overhead. And then I saw something. At first, it was just a shape up ahead, dark, tall, walking upright. It crossed the road maybe 300 feet in front of me. Not running, not lumbering, just moving, like it had a destination. Now, I've seen moose, I've seen bear, elk, even the occasional wolf on 2 legs mid-leap. This wasn't that. This thing was taller than the hood of my Peterbilt, and wide, not long like an elk, not bulky like a grizzly, but just tall, with a kind of weird stillness to the way it moved. It vanished into the tree line on the other side before I could slow down. And when I drove past the spot it crossed, the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. I didn't slam the brakes or anything. I just kept driving, slower now, eyes darting between the trees as I passed. But that feeling wouldn't leave me. You know the one, like something's watching you from just beyond your line of sight. I've driven through blizzards, near wrecks, even once had a drunk with a crowbar come at me in a parking lot. None of that spooked me like that moment. It stuck with me all the way back to Havre. I didn't tell anyone at first. I mean, what would I even say? Hey, I saw something tall in the woods and got a bad vibe. Sounds like a sleep-deprived trucker with too much caffeine and not enough rest. But a few days later, I'm tuning into the local trucker channel, just killing time while waiting on a load, and this guy comes on, one of the tow truck drivers that services the area. His voice is steady, but he's serious, like dead serious. Says he was driving a remote pull-off north of Chinook when he saw something step out of the woods and look at him. He kept repeating, "I know what I saw. I'm not crazy. I know it sounds insane, but it looked like a damn Bigfoot." He even apologized, said he didn't want to come off as a nut job, but he couldn't shake it. Said the thing didn't run, didn't act scared, just looked at him, then stepped back into the bush like it had done it 100 times before. Hearing that hit me like a ton of bricks. My stomach turned, and I just sat there staring at my radio. I had told myself I must have seen a bear on its hind legs, or maybe my eyes were tired from the drive. But this guy, this total stranger, described almost exactly what I saw, right down to the way it moved. That night, I mentioned it to one of the regulars at a diner up near Fort Belknap. He was native, one of the Blackfeet folks, always polite but quiet. When I told him, his expression didn't even change. He just said, "You saw what's always been there. We've known about them long before roads got built." That conversation with the Blackfeet guy stuck with me more than I'd like to admit. Not because it was creepy, though, believe me, it was, but because of how matter-of-fact he was. Like I'd just told him I saw a raccoon in a dumpster. No surprise, no disbelief, no, "You sure it wasn't a bear?" After that, I started paying more attention when I ran routes through the back roads of Montana, Idaho, even into eastern Washington. I'd talk with older guys at truck stops, quiet ones usually, and if I hinted at weird stuff in the woods, a few would give me that look. The kind that says, "Yeah, I've seen it too, but I'm not talking unless you do first." One guy near Coeur d'Alene told me about screams he heard up in the Panhandle. Said it wasn't a mountain lion, wasn't a coyote, something deeper. Another swore he saw a figure in the tree line pacing his truck for half a mile near midnight, only to vanish without a sound. Me? I never saw that thing again. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to, but I think about it a lot, more than I'd like to admit. I used to run hotshot freight all across the Great Plains, mostly through Minnesota and the Dakotas. It was a quiet kind of job. Just me, the road, and whatever critical parts some farmer or factory desperately needed by sunrise. That night, I was cutting across North Dakota, somewhere around 2 in the morning, pushing to get a tractor gearbox to a farm in central Montana before dawn. It wasn't my first time doing midnight runs through these empty stretches of highway, but that night, that night stuck with me. Now, if you've ever driven across North Dakota, you know it's as flat as a pool table. The kind of flat that makes the sky feel bigger than anything you've ever seen. The roads are long and straight too, real easy to zone out on if you're not careful. I felt it creeping in, highway hypnosis. That weird trance when your body's still driving but your mind's floating somewhere else. I shook it off, rolled down the window a crack, and cranked up the radio, just trying to keep sharp. The trailer was loaded with a pricey John Deere part. Thing must have cost 15 grand. And it had to be at the farm before 8 a.m. No excuses. Maybe 20 minutes outside of a town called Belfield, I spotted something way up ahead in my lane. Looked long, stretching all the way across it, and at first I figured it was just a big chunk of retread from a blown semi-tire. That's pretty common out here, and they can do a hell of a number on your undercarriage if you don't steer around them. I flicked on the high beams. That's when I realized it wasn't rubber. It was 2 people, lying down, head to toe, stretched across my entire lane like they were measuring the damn thing with their bodies. I instinctively hit the brakes, hard, not enough to jackknife, but just to give me more time to think. I flicked my left signal and eased into the opposite lane, keeping an eye on the figures. They still weren't moving. I passed by slow, maybe 25 miles an hour, expecting them to jump up, wave their arms, or maybe even shout for help. Nothing. They didn't twitch, didn't flinch, just laid there like they were dead. I brought the truck to a near stop about 100 feet past them. My hazard lights clicked on, blinking red in the mirrors. I was staring through the side mirror, trying to make sense of what I saw. My first thought, maybe they were hurt. Maybe it was an accident, or maybe they were drunk and passed out. But something about the whole thing just didn't sit right with me. The way they were laid out perfectly across the lane, too deliberate. That's when an old story crept into my brain, one of those campfire-type warnings that gets passed down from old truckers who've seen too much. I remember this grizzled veteran, call him Randy, telling me about a scam he'd heard of out in remote stretches of the plains. People would lie down on the road, wait for a driver to stop, and then a bunch of others hiding nearby would ambush the guy. Beat the hell out of him, take the truck, leave him bleeding in the middle of nowhere. At the time, I thought it was just a story, something to spook rookies. But now, staring through my windshield, the road behind glowing faintly in the red of my taillights, it didn't feel like a story anymore. My hand was still resting on the shifter. I took it out of neutral, back into gear. Just then, I saw them start to move. The moment I put my truck back into gear and the engine gave that low grumble, both of them stirred. They didn't flinch like people waking up. They didn't stagger like someone injured. No, these two moved like they'd just finished waiting for something. They stood up, calm, synchronized, one after the other, like clockwork. No rush, no panic, just stood. I watched in the mirror as they stepped off the highway toward the shoulder. One of them turned, looked right toward my truck, like he knew I was watching. And even though I couldn't make out a face in the dark, I swear I felt his stare hit me through the glass. I didn't wait to see what came next. I eased back onto the gas, staying just under the speed limit, heart pounding, eyes locked on those mirrors. I kept waiting to see more shadows step out from the fields, kept listening for the sudden roar of another engine behind me. But nothing came. I drove maybe 10 miles before I finally reached an off-ramp with a small service area. I parked under the lights, took a long breath, and called the local highway patrol. Told them everything, where I'd seen the two figures, what they did, how far out I was. Dispatcher took the report and said they'd send a unit to check it out, but in a voice that made it sound like they didn't expect to find anything. And you know what? I doubt they did. That stretch of road is so remote, it's basically pitch black after sunset. No gas stations, no towns, just flat, endless space. I never heard back about the report, never saw anything on the news, but I'll tell you this, I know what I saw. I know how those two just got up and walked off like they'd been caught too early. And I'll always remember that old-timer's warning, the one that probably saved my rig, my job, and maybe more. Out there on the road, you don't get a second chance if you guess wrong. Sometimes not stopping is the only way to stay alive. Back in 2019, I was driving for Costco during the holiday rush, handling extra shipments for all the high-demand toys. That time of year was chaos. Parents scrambling to grab the latest stuff for their kids, shelves getting cleared out before the afternoon rush even hit. One night, dispatch called me around 11 p.m. Said one of our rural Kentucky stores had just run out of their giant Spider-Man dolls, some life-sized things that were selling like hotcakes. It was last minute, as always, but they knew I was fast, dependable, and didn't complain about weird hours. So I got the load strapped down and hit the 265 heading east. It was a cold December night, crisp and quiet. Roads were dead after midnight, which I usually didn't mind. Gave me time to clear my head, sip on my coffee, and focus on the road without any crazy drivers buzzing past me. But somewhere around 3 a.m., right outside of Shepherdsville, I got this weird feeling crawling up my back, like something was watching me from the trees. It was one of those instincts that make no sense but feel too loud to ignore. I brushed it off, figured it was just the late hour messing with me, so I popped a couple no-dos and cranked the radio. That helped for a bit. But about 15 minutes later, fog rolled in, and not your typical morning mist. This stuff was thick, heavy, like a wet sheet thrown over the world. It swallowed my headlights whole and coated the windshield like frost. My high beams didn't even cut through it. I slowed to a crawl, then figured I'd just pull off and wait it out. I had some time to kill, and no one else was on the road. I eased the rig onto the shoulder, switched on the hazard lights, and then everything went black. The dashboard shut down, engine died. Even the hazard lights flickered once, and someone vanished. I sat there, hands still on the wheel, heart pounding. Tried the ignition, nothing. Dead silence, no CB signal, no cell service. I checked my phone anyway, like a fool. No bars, just me, my truck, and that choking fog. Then the real weirdness began. I sat there, frozen in that eerie silence, every second feeling like it stretched forever. The inside of my cab felt smaller than usual, like the fog outside was pressing in, squeezing the air thinner with each breath. I glanced at my side mirrors, but they were just white walls. Couldn't even see the back end of my trailer. Then I heard it. At first, I wasn't sure what I was hearing, a faint, muffled sound beneath the quiet hum of the night. I shut off the radio completely and held my breath. And there it was again, crying. At first, it sounded like a child, soft, high-pitched sobs just outside my driver's side window. My first instinct was that someone might actually be in trouble. Maybe a family broke down in the fog and a kid had wandered off. I rolled the window down a couple of inches and leaned out, squinting into the haze. "Hey," I called. "You okay out there? Anybody need help?" The crying didn't stop. In fact, it shifted. It got deeper, slower, almost like it aged into a woman's voice. A grown woman sobbing in pain or panic. My skin crawled. Something about it didn't feel right. Too controlled, too rehearsed. I looked down from the window, half expecting to see someone crouched by my truck. But there was no one. Just fog. "Hello?" I tried again, louder. That's when the crying stopped, abruptly, mid-sob. Then came the laugh. It wasn't loud at first, just a low chuckle, throaty, raspy, and entirely human. But there was nothing comforting about it. It was the kind of sound you'd hear from someone who knew they had the upper hand. someone enjoying a sick joke that hadn't finished playing out yet. I slammed the window shut and locked the door. The laugh continued, louder now, surrounding me. It didn't sound like it was coming from a single direction. It was all around me, behind the cab, under the hood, even inside my trailer. Like the fog was echoing it back at me. I could feel it, not just the sound, but the pressure of it, like it was feeding on my fear. The more I panicked, the bolder it became. My breathing quickened, my palms were slick with sweat, and the laugh. God, the laugh just kept going, up and down in pitch, high and mocking 1 second, deep and guttural the next. Then, without warning, silence. Total suffocating silence. And just like that, the dash lights flickered back to life. I heard the low rumble of the engine turning over without me even touching the ignition. The headlights cut back through the fog, though it was already starting to thin. I sat there, stunned, staring at the now functional dashboard like it was some kind of miracle. Whatever had happened, it was over. But I still felt eyes on me. I didn't waste another second. As soon as my engine fully roared to life, I shifted into drive and got the hell out of there. I didn't care that visibility was still bad, or that I was technically ahead of schedule. I needed to move. Needed to get somewhere with lights, with people, with anything but this creeping emptiness pressing in on me. The fog cleared unnaturally fast. Like someone flipping a switch, it just lifted. 1 minute I could barely see the road lines, and the next, the sky opened up and I could finally see the stars again. No clouds, no rain, nothing. Like the storm, and whatever came with it, was never there. It was still the dead of night, but now the world looked normal again. Familiar. About 20 miles later, I pulled into a truck stop just off the highway. It wasn't busy, just 2 other rigs parked and the glow of a flickering sign that read, "Coffee 24/7. I didn't bother fueling up. I parked, cut the engine, and just sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from floating off into some weird alternate dimension. Eventually, I forced myself into the restroom inside. I splashed cold water on my face over and over, trying to snap myself back to reality. I caught my own reflection in the mirror and just stared. My eyes looked hollow, like I hadn't slept in a week. I remember whispering to myself, "Did that really just happen?" I said it again and again, hoping it would sound more ridiculous each time. But it didn't. The guy behind the counter didn't say much when I bought a bottle of water, just nodded and went back to his magazine. I wanted to ask him if he'd ever heard weird things happening nearby, but the words caught in my throat. What would I even say? Hey, has anyone ever reported laughter in the fog after their truck dies for no reason? I got back to my rig and sat in the driver's seat with the door locked and my thermos clutched tight. I didn't drive again for another hour. I just couldn't. I needed time to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. Eventually, I made it to the drop-off point. No delays, no questions, just another early morning delivery logged in the system. Nobody ever knew what I'd gone through. I've told a couple drivers over the years, mostly at late-night diners or during long layovers when stories start coming out. Some of them nodded like they'd had similar experiences. Some just laughed and chalked it up to highway fatigue. Hell, maybe it was. But I know what I felt. I know what I heard. And ever since that night, every time I drive through Kentucky during the holidays, I keep an eye out for fog. Not normal fog, but that bone-deep, soul-squeezing kind of fog that doesn't roll in from nature, but from somewhere else. Because whatever was out there that night, it wasn't just weather. I've been a long-haul trucker for almost 15 years now, seen just about everything you can imagine on the road, blinding snowstorms in Wyoming, gators, the shredded rubber kind, flying at my windshield in Texas, and even a full-on tornado crossing I-80 in Nebraska once. But nothing, not even the weird paranormal stuff other drivers whisper about at truck stops, prepared me for what I saw during a routine overnight run from Chicago to Atlanta. This happened back in late November, right around Thanksgiving. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce, just another cold run to make before the holiday rush. I'd been driving for a solid 8 hours already and had passed through Indianapolis, heading southeast on I-65. It was somewhere near Louisville, close to 2 a.m. when it started. Traffic was almost non-existent that night. Just me, the humming of my engine, and the soft white stripes on the blacktop stretching endlessly ahead. The CB was quiet, and even the sky looked dead. No stars, just a thick, overcast ceiling. I was sipping on some stale gas station coffee, doing maybe 65 mph in the center lane, when I noticed a car easing up alongside me. A dark gray sedan, Chevy Malibu or something close to it. As it pulled up on my right, I glanced over, mostly just out of habit. That's when I saw her. The woman in the passenger seat had this tight, severe bun on her head. Looked exactly like what my mom used to call a schoolmarm style. What hit me wasn't the hair, though. It was her face. She was staring at me, deadlocked, unblinking. Her expression was pure terror, her eyes wide and shimmering in the passing light, mouth slightly open like she was mid-gasp or trying to scream but couldn't. It was like she was silently begging me for help. The driver beside her, some middle-aged white guy, both hands on the wheel, completely stone-faced, not even glancing in my direction. I only had a couple of seconds to take it in before the car veered off onto the next exit ramp, vanished into the dark. I stared at the empty stretch of road ahead, trying to process it. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions, but something about her expression stuck with me. It wasn't just fear, it was desperation. I remember thinking maybe she was trying to mouth something to me, but it all happened too fast. I flipped on my CB and asked if anyone else had seen that gray Malibu exit off I-65 near Elizabethtown. No response, just static. I told myself I was tired. Maybe she was having a panic attack. Maybe I imagined it. That kind of thing happens when you've been staring at white lines for too long. I popped open a fresh Red Bull and tried to shake it off, but I wouldn't be able to. Not that night, not after what happened next. I kept driving, trying to convince myself I was just tired. But that image of the woman, her face twisted in silent fear, that weird bun on top of her head, wouldn't leave me alone. Something about her expression had burrowed into my brain like a tick. I couldn't shake it. And things were about to get even stranger. Maybe 30, 40 minutes passed. I was deep into Kentucky by now, cruising through a patch of open country highway when another car started coming up alongside me. This time it was a white Ford Taurus, pretty beat up looking, with one headlight a little dimmer than the other. Just like before, it pulled up to my passenger side, matching my speed. Out of habit, I looked over, and I damn near dropped my coffee. It was her, the same woman, same exact face, same hairstyle, same pale complexion, and that same haunted look. Except now she was in a completely different car, with a completely different driver. A younger guy this time, probably early 30s, with a baseball cap and goatee. He never looked over. She did, dead in the eyes. That same expression, like she was trying to tell me something, trying to scream without sound. My heart dropped into my stomach. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't some long-haul hallucination. I was seeing the same woman in two different cars with two different drivers less than an hour apart. And she hadn't changed. Not a smudge, not a blink, not a twitch. It was like someone had copied and pasted her into another car and hit play. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I reached for my phone, thinking I'd snap a photo, get a plate number, anything to prove I wasn't going crazy. But just as I started to fumble with the phone, the Taurus accelerated and veered off at the next exit, just like the first one. Gone. I slowed down a bit, trying to breathe, trying to get my thoughts in order. I started planning to stop at the next rest area, maybe report what I'd seen. Even if it turned out to be some bizarre coincidence, I figured it wouldn't hurt to tell someone. Only problem? I never got the chance. Because just before I reached that rest stop, it happened again. Another car, another driver, same woman. This time she wasn't just staring, she was screaming. By now I was running cold. No amount of coffee or cab heat could touch the chill that was crawling up my spine. About 4 hours after the second sighting, just outside the outskirts of Louisville, I saw another car pulling up on my right. This time, It was a dark blue Dodge Charger, clean, new, the kind of car someone with money or law enforcement ties might drive. I didn't want to look, I really didn't, but my gut told me I had to. So I turned my head, and there she was again. Same woman, same bun, same pale, rigid face. Except this time, her mouth was wide open, screaming. Not a sound came through the window, but I could see her throat stretched, teeth clenched, hands pounding against the passenger window. She wasn't just looking scared now, she was pleading. I slammed my foot off the gas and veered into the next lay-by, heart racing. This wasn't just a weird coincidence or highway hypnosis anymore. This was something else, something beyond explanation. I grabbed my phone and called the state police, stumbling through the whole story. The dispatcher asked me to stay put while she patched me through to a trooper in the area. When the officer picked up, I barely had to explain. He cut me off halfway through and said, "You're not the first person to call about this woman tonight. We've had 3 other reports from truckers in the same corridor, describing the same woman in different cars. We've got units canvassing the area." That didn't exactly make me feel better. I asked if they'd found her, if anyone knew who she was or what was going on. He said they didn't have a name, a plate, or a clear lead yet. She and the cars always vanished before they could be tracked down. The reports were too spread out, too strange. And then that was it. Nothing more. I waited a while, gave them the details I could remember, car color, hair, direction of travel, but I knew deep down it wouldn't help. No follow-up ever came. I kept an eye on the news for weeks, checked missing persons databases, listened to CB chatter, not a word. I never saw her again, but I still think about her, about how many other drivers might have seen the same pale woman screaming from a different car, hoping one of us would figure it out, hoping one of us would listen. And every now and then, when I'm driving those long stretches alone, I still glance at the cars that pass me on the right, just to be sure, because I'll never forget her face, and I'll never stop wondering what the hell she was trying to say. 10 stories. 10 reasons why truckers don't just fear fatigue or breakdowns, but the unknown that lurks in the dark stretches of highway. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. So tell us, which story chilled you the most? Leave a comment below. We're always listening. And if you enjoyed these tales from the road, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to Mr. Rainy Night for more real horror stories told straight from the driver's seat. Until next time, keep your headlights on, and whatever you do, don't pull over.